Light filtered through the dense foliage of Viridia, casting an eerie blue-green glow across the forest floor. The air hung thick with the scent of exotic blossoms and decaying vegetation, a paradoxical symphony of life and death that characterized this alien world. Strange sounds echoed through the canopy, whistles, clicks, and low rumbles from creatures hidden from view. Liam Reeves regained consciousness with a violent cough, his lungs burning as they adapted to the planet's rich atmosphere. Blood trickled down his forehead, momentarily blinding his right eye before he wiped it away with the back of his hand. He lay amid the wreckage of the Stardust, the expedition vessel that had been his home for the past 8 months. Twisted metal surrounded him, embedded in the soft earth and tangled with luminescent vines that had already begun to claim the foreign object. "Jensen? Commander Whitley?" Liam called out, his voice hoarse and barely audible above the ambient sounds of the jungle. No response came. He struggled to his feet, wincing at the sharp pain in his ribs, broken or badly bruised. He couldn't tell. The cockpit was completely crushed, and what remained of the crew quarters was exposed to the elements, sparking circuitry casting intermittent flashes across the destruction. He was alone. The crushing realization settled on him as he limped through the wreckage, checking for any signs of survivors. Bodies of his crewmates lay motionless, some partially buried under debris. 6 people, all dead. Liam fought back the urge to vomit as grief and shock threatened to overwhelm him. Focus, he told himself. The mission protocol was clear for emergency situations: secure resources, establish shelter, activate the distress beacon. He gathered what he could salvage: a damaged handheld bioscanner, a basic first aid kit, a portable water purifier, and his personal tablet, cracked but still functional. The long-range communications array was beyond repair, but he might be able to boost the emergency signal if he could find the right components. Liam's training as a xenobiologist had prepared him for field work on alien worlds, but nothing could prepare him for being marooned, potentially light years from rescue. The Stardust had been thrown off course by an unexpected gravitational anomaly before systems failure sent them plummeting toward Viridia. It could be weeks or months before anyone realized they were missing, let alone pinpointed their location. As dusk approached, casting the forest in purple shadows, Liam established a makeshift camp in what remained of the cargo hold. It offered some protection while giving him access to the ship's emergency supplies. He treated his wounds as best he could, purified water from a nearby stream, and forced himself to eat a ration bar despite his churning stomach. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by unfamiliar sounds and the throbbing pain of his injuries. By dawn, if one could call the gradual brightening of the perpetual twilight under the dense canopy dawn, Liam had formulated a plan. He would explore the immediate area, map his surroundings, catalog potential food sources, and search for materials to strengthen his shelter and communication abilities. His first encounters with Viridia's fauna were relatively benign. Small, 6-legged creatures resembling fuzzy lizards scattered as he approached. Winged organisms with translucent bodies sailed between trees, their internal organs visible through their skin. Liam documented everything on his tablet, the scientist in him momentarily overriding his predicament. On the 3rd day, while collecting water, Liam encountered his first hostile life form. The creature, which he mentally dubbed a crawler, emerged from the undergrowth with startling speed. About the size of a large dog, with multiple jointed limbs and a segmented exoskeleton, it hissed and charged. Liam barely escaped by scrambling up a tree, the creature's mandibles snapping inches from his boot. After an hour of standoff, the crawler finally lost interest and slithered away. The incident shook Liam deeply. He needed better protection, perhaps a weapon. Using broken metal from the ship, he fashioned a crude spear and started carrying it during his expeditions. His confidence grew slightly as he became more familiar with his immediate environment, learning which areas to avoid and which fruits appeared safe for consumption after testing them with his bioscanner. A week after the crash, disaster struck again. Liam was following a promising stream, hoping to find a clearer area where he might set up a more visible distress signal when the vegetation around him began to rustle. He froze, spear ready, as a massive creature broke through the underbrush. It stood on 6 muscular legs, with razor-sharp claws that dug into the earth. Ridged armor plating covered its body, and its elongated head featured multiple compound eyes and gnashing mandibular appendages. "Hey, Razor Claw," Liam thought in terror, recalling the xenobiology briefings on potentially dangerous Viridian fauna. The creature had been theoretical then. Now it was all too real and all too focused on him. Liam backed away slowly, spear extended, but the Razor Claw advanced, undeterred. He managed to dodge its first lunge, jabbing with his makeshift weapon, but the metal tip merely glanced off the creature's armored hide. The Razor Claw circled, its movements becoming more agitated. Liam knew he wouldn't survive a direct attack. His back hit a massive tree trunk, nowhere left to retreat. The Razor Claw coiled, preparing to pounce. Liam raised his spear in a futile gesture of defiance. The attack never came. Instead, a blur of movement dropped from above, landing with impossible grace between Liam and the predator. A humanoid figure crouched there, smaller than Liam, but radiating danger. Blue-green skin with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with her movements. Feline-like eyes, vertical pupils dilated in the dim light. She wore garments fashioned from materials Liam couldn't identify, adorned with small bones and crystalline structures that caught what little light penetrated the canopy. Without hesitation, she lunged at the Razor Claw, moving with fluid, practiced motions. A blade flashed in her hand, bone or possibly crystalline, as she ducked under the creature's snapping jaws. She slashed at the vulnerable areas between its armor plates, drawing a viscous yellow fluid that Liam presumed was blood. The Razor Claw screeched, thrashing to catch its new attacker, but she was too quick, too precise. In less than a minute, the fearsome predator lay still, its multiple legs twitching in death throes. The humanoid wiped her blade on a leaf and then, with a graceful pivot, turned to face Liam. Her gaze was intense, curious but wary. She studied him as one might study an unusual specimen, which Liam supposed he was. He remained perfectly still, unsure whether he had been saved or merely reserved for a different predator. "I'm not a threat," he said slowly, lowering his spear and raising his empty hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Thank you for saving me." The being tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, with alarming speed, she closed the distance between them. Liam flinched but held his ground. She reached out, touching his face with cool fingers, tracing the contours of his features and the dried blood from his earlier wound. Her closeness allowed Liam to observe her more clearly. Her face was almost human, yet undeniably alien. High cheekbones, a narrow nose, lips that were full but tinged with the same blue-green as her skin. Most striking were her eyes, large, golden, with vertical pupils that contracted as she studied him. Without warning, she bared her teeth, sharp and slightly curved, with 2 prominent fangs, and lunged for his neck. Pain exploded where her teeth punctured his skin, sharp and burning, spreading like liquid fire down his spine. Liam gasped, expecting paralysis or death, but instead experienced a wave of extraordinary sensation. His vision sharpened dramatically, colors intensifying to almost painful brilliance. Every sound in the forest became distinct. The heartbeat of small creatures hiding in the undergrowth, the rustle of leaves in a breeze he could now feel on every inch of exposed skin. Time seemed to slow as warmth suffused his body, followed by a heady rush that made his knees buckle. The being pulled back, her golden eyes wide with shock. She touched her lips, then looked at Liam with newfound intensity. He staggered, the world still hypersaturated around him, his nerve endings singing with unfamiliar energy. He saw confusion in her expression, then curiosity, then something else, a hunger that had nothing to do with sustenance. Before Liam could recover his balance, she struck him with the hilt of her blade, precisely at the temple. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was her face, those golden eyes still wide with surprise and fascination. When Liam regained consciousness, his first sensation was of softness beneath him, a stark contrast to the hard ground he'd been sleeping on since the crash. He blinked slowly, his vision adjusting to a diffuse, amber light. He lay on a pallet of woven fibers, surprisingly comfortable despite its simplicity. Above him, a domed ceiling of interwoven branches and vines created a natural shelter, embellished with glowing fungi that provided gentle illumination. He tried to move, but found his wrists and ankles bound with flexible but strong vines. The restraints allowed some movement, but not enough to sit up fully. His neck throbbed where the being had bitten him, though the pain had subsided to a dull ache. Looking around, Liam took in his surroundings. The structure appeared to be a dwelling built within or around a massive tree. Various items hung from the ceiling, bundles of dried plants, bone, implements, containers made from hollowed gourds or similar materials. A small fire pit occupied the center of the space, currently holding only embers that cast shifting shadows across the walls. Movement caught his eye. His captor emerged from a shadowed alcove, carrying something in her hands. In the better light, Liam could see her more clearly. Her blue-green skin was adorned with natural markings that resembled tattoos, flowing patterns in deeper blues and greens that enhanced her already alien beauty. She moved with predatory grace, each gesture economical yet fluid. She approached cautiously, kneeling beside him. In her hands was a shallow bowl containing a thick paste. Without speaking, she began applying it to the various cuts and bruises Liam had sustained in the crash and his subsequent week of survival. The substance stung briefly before producing a cooling, numbing sensation. "Thank you," Liam said softly, though he doubted she understood. "My name is Liam. Liam Reeves." He tapped his chest with his restrained hand, then nodded toward her. "Do you have a name?" She paused, studying him. Then, touching her own chest, she made a sound that resembled Zyra. "Zyra," Liam repeated, offering a small smile. "It's nice to meet you, although I wish the circumstances were different." Zyra continued applying the medicine, her face betraying no emotion. When she finished, she set the bowl aside and reached for his neck, examining the bite mark she'd left. Her touch was gentle now, almost clinical, but Liam noticed how her pupils dilated when her fingers brushed the puncture wounds. She withdrew abruptly, moving to the other side of the dwelling. Liam watched as she busied herself with various tasks, sorting through bundles of plants, sharpening a blade, arranging items in patterns that seemed to have significance. Occasionally, she would glance his way, her expression unreadable. Liam tried to engage her again. "I came from the sky," he said, making a falling motion with his bound hands. My vessel crashed. The others with me died. I'm alone here." Zyra showed no sign of comprehension, though her eyes tracked his movements intently. She approached again, this time with a container of water, which she helped him drink. The liquid was cool and sweet, unlike the purified water from his supplies. As night fell, indicated by the dimming of the ambient light outside the dwelling, Zyra prepared a simple meal. She offered Liam roasted tubers and strips of dried meat from an unknown source. Hungry despite his situation, he ate cautiously, relieved when his bioscanner, which Zyra had placed nearby with his other salvaged items, showed no obvious toxins. For days, this pattern continued. Zyra would leave for hours, presumably to hunt or gather, returning with food or materials. She tended to Liam's injuries, ensured he was fed and had water, but maintained the restraints. Communication remained minimal, a few shared words, gestures, expressions. Liam learned to recognize when she was agitated, curious, or satisfied, but her deeper thoughts remained a mystery. He did notice, however, that she seemed increasingly restless as days passed. She would pace, touch her lips absently, and watch him with growing intensity. Sometimes she would approach as if to examine his neck, then withdraw suddenly, seemingly conflicted. On what Liam estimated was his 5th day in captivity, Zyra returned from a hunting expedition with a minor injury, a gash on her forearm. As she cleaned it, Liam gestured for her to use the medicinal paste on herself. She hesitated, then allowed him to apply it, his bound hands making the task awkward but manageable. The brief contact seemed to break something loose in her. She seized his wrist suddenly, her grip strong. Her breathing quickened, pupils dilating until her eyes were mostly black-rimmed with gold. With her free hand, she touched the healing bite marks on his neck. Liam remained still, sensing the importance of this moment. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not afraid." It wasn't entirely true. He was afraid, but also intensely curious. The first bite had been painful, but had produced sensations unlike anything he'd experienced. He had replayed that moment in his mind repeatedly, trying to understand what had happened and why she had reacted with such surprise. Zyra leaned closer, her face inches from his. She inhaled deeply, as if catching his scent. Then, with a motion almost too fast to follow, she bit him again, this time on the junction where his shoulder met his neck. The pain was briefer this time, immediately supplanted by the rush of heightened sensation. Colors exploded behind Liam's eyes, every nerve ending singing with electric pleasure pain. He gasped, his back arching involuntarily. Through the haze, he watched Zyra's reaction. Her eyes closed in apparent ecstasy, her body trembling slightly. When she pulled away, a look of profound satisfaction settled on her features, followed quickly by confusion and what might have been shame. She touched his face with surprising tenderness, then retreated to the far side of the dwelling, her back to him as she processed what had occurred. Liam's mind raced as the sensory overload gradually subsided. He was beginning to form a theory. Zyra's bite was clearly venomous. The initial burning sensation and the dramatic effects on his nervous system confirmed that. Yet the venom didn't paralyze or kill him as it presumably did with her prey. Instead, it created this intense stimulation of his senses and apparently produced some reciprocal effect in her when she delivered it. More intriguing was her reaction, her surprise at first, then this growing preoccupation, culminating in what seemed like an irresistible compulsion to bite him again. It suggested that whatever happened when she bit him was not normal, perhaps unprecedented in her experience. The next morning, Zyra made a decision. She approached Liam and carefully cut his ankle restraints, though she left his wrists bound, attaching them to a longer vine that she held like a leash. Her meaning was clear. He could walk, but he remained her captive. She led him outside, and Liam got his first view of her home. They were indeed in a massive tree, with the dwelling nestled in a hollow midway up the trunk. A system of branches, vines, and crude ladders connected it to the forest floor and to other, similar structures higher in the canopy. The area was a riot of colors, bioluminescent fungi, flowering vines, and the extraordinary plumage of bird-like creatures that flitted through the branches. Zyra guided him through the forest, occasionally stopping to show him plants, which to eat, which to avoid. She demonstrated how to find water trapped in certain broadleaf plants and how to move silently through the undergrowth. Though communication remained limited, Liam began to understand that she was teaching him, helping him adapt to Viridia. During their expedition, Liam witnessed Zyra's hunting skills firsthand. She tracked and killed a small, six-legged herbivore with practiced efficiency. What captivated him was her method. After wearing the creature down, she delivered a precise bite to its neck. The animal immediately stiffened, paralyzed by her venom, allowing her to dispatch it humanely with her blade. The contrast with his own reaction to her bite was stark and confirmed his theory. Her venom was paralyzing, likely lethal to Viridian fauna, yet it affected him entirely differently. The question was, why? As they returned to the tree dwelling, Liam noticed concerning changes in the environment. Patches of vegetation showed signs of an unusual blight. Leaves curling and turning brown, fungi developing irregular patterns, water sources emitting a subtle but unpleasant odor. Zyra noticed his attention and guided him to a particularly affected area, her expression grim as she showed him a small stream with an oily film on its surface. That night, something shifted in their dynamic. Zyra loosened Liam's wrist restraints enough to allow him to feed himself. She brought out what appeared to be drawing implements, pieces of charcoal and flattened bark, and began sketching. Her drawings were rudimentary but clear. The forest, healthy, then the forest with the blight spreading. She drew creatures he recognized as shadow stalkers, though their form was slightly different from standard Viridian predators, with skeletal protrusions and asymmetrical features suggesting mutation. Liam took the charcoal and added to her drawing, showing his ship falling from the sky, himself surviving alone, then meeting her. Zyra watched intently, nodding her understanding. Communication was emerging between them, primitive but meaningful. As the days passed, their expeditions grew longer and ranged further. Zyra maintained her hold on the vine that kept Liam tethered, but it became more symbolic than restrictive. Liam noticed her watching him with growing curiosity and what he interpreted as possessiveness, especially when they encountered potential dangers. The bite incidents continued, becoming more frequent. Sometimes they occurred during moments of stress or after close encounters with predators, as if Zyra needed the stimulation to maintain her focus or calm. Other times they happened during quieter moments in the dwelling, initiated with a look that Liam came to recognize, hunger mixed with something almost like affection. Each time, the effect seemed stronger for both of them. Liam experienced increasingly vivid sensory enhancement and a growing connection to Zyra herself. Sometimes he could sense her emotions or even her approximate location when they were separated. For her part, Zyra appeared to derive intense pleasure from the bites, followed by periods of increased strength and heightened awareness. Liam's scientific mind cataloged these effects meticulously. His hypothesis evolved, something in his human biochemistry was reacting with her venom to create a unique symbiosis. The bites were becoming not just a strange addiction for Zyra, but a genuine bond between them, albeit one neither fully understood. 2 weeks into his captivity, everything changed. They were returning from an expedition when Zyra suddenly tensed, pulling Liam behind a massive tree trunk. She placed a finger to her lips, then pointed ahead. Through the foliage, Liam spotted them. 3 creatures unlike anything he'd seen before. They resembled Viridian predators, but with disturbing differences. Their natural armor was overgrown and misshapen, with spike-like protrusions erupting at random intervals. Their movements were jerky yet purposeful, and they emitted a low, dissonant hum that set Liam's teeth on edge. Shadow stalkers, like in Zyra's drawing, but far more terrifying in reality. Zyra drew her blade, her body coiled for action. Liam understood her intent. She planned to attack, despite being outnumbered. He touched her arm, shaking his head in warning. Reaching for his tablet, he pulled up the bioscanner function and directed it toward the creatures, hoping to gather data that might reveal a weakness. The scan showed alarming results. The Shadow Stalker's biology was chaotic, cells mutating rapidly, energy signatures fluctuating in patterns that suggested instability. Most concerning, they showed traces of a contaminant Liam recognized from his earlier scans of blighted areas. Before he could communicate this to Zyra, one of the creatures turned, its compound eyes swiveling in their direction. It emitted a high-pitched screech that alerted its companions. All 3 charged toward their hiding place. Zyra pushed Liam behind her and engaged the first Shadow Stalker, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. She wounded it, but unlike normal prey, it didn't retreat or falter. The creature pressed forward, seemingly insensible to pain. The other 2 circled, looking for an opening. Liam's restraints limited his options, but he refused to be helpless. Using a broken branch as a makeshift weapon, he managed to fend off one shadow stalker momentarily. Zyra delivered a venomous bite to the creature she was fighting, but to their mutual shock, it had minimal effect. The shadow stalker slowed briefly, but continued its attack. As the situation grew desperate, Liam spotted a potential solution. His scanner had identified a high concentration of unstable energy in the creature's central nervous systems. If overloaded, it might incapacitate them. Frantically, he adjusted his damage tablet to emit its strongest electromagnetic pulse, a function intended for emergency signaling, not combat. "Zyra," he called, holding up the device. Though she couldn't understand his words, she recognized his intent. With remarkable coordination, she maneuvered the shadow stalkers into a tight grouping, then dived clear as Liam activated the pulse. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The creatures convulsed, their mutated forms contorting further before they collapsed, twitching. The victory was short-lived. One began to recover almost immediately, struggling to its feet with renewed aggression. Zyra grabbed Liam's hand, severing his restraints completely with a quick slash of her blade. They ran deeper into the forest than they had ventured before. Behind them, screeches indicated the shadow stalkers had recovered and were in pursuit. They ran until Liam's lungs burned, the unfamiliar atmosphere taxing his endurance. Zyra never slowed, practically dragging him at times. Just as exhaustion threatened to overcome him, they broke through the dense vegetation into a clearing dominated by enormous trees. Structures similar to Zyra's dwelling, but larger and more numerous, were integrated into these ancient giants. Bridges of woven vines connected various levels, and figures similar to Zyra moved among them. Zyra called out in her language, a series of melodic clicks and sustained vowels. Immediately, several warriors descended, weapons ready. They positioned themselves between the forest edge and the newcomers just as the shadow stalkers emerged. What followed was a coordinated defense that spoke of long practice. The warriors attacked in patterns, some engaging directly, while others used projectile weapons, darts or small spears tipped with what Liam presumed was the same venom Zyra possessed. Unlike Zyra's bite, these envenomed weapons had some effect on the shadow stalkers, suggesting a higher concentration or different delivery method. The battle was fierce but brief. 2 shadow stalkers were killed, the third retreating into the forest with multiple wounds. Several warriors had sustained injuries, though none appeared life-threatening. Attention now turned to Liam. The warriors surrounded him, spears pointed at his chest. Zyra positioned herself partially in front of him, speaking rapidly in her language. An argument ensued, growing increasingly heated until an authoritative voice cut through the tension. An older male emerged from the crowd. His skin was a deeper blue than the others, his markings more extensive and elaborate. He wore a headdress of crystalline structures and carried a staff adorned with similar materials. His presence commanded immediate respect, the warriors stepping aside to allow him passage. "Kalen," Zyra said, gesturing to the elder. Her tone suggested both respect and defiance. Kalen circled Liam slowly, examining him with undisguised suspicion. He spoke sharply to Zyra, who responded with equal intensity, occasionally gesturing to Liam or to the forest beyond. Though Liam couldn't understand the words, the conflict was clear. Zyra was defending her decision to bring him here, while Kalen viewed him as a threat. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for another interruption. An elderly female approached, her movements slow but purposeful. Unlike the warriors, she carried no weapons, only a small pouch at her waist. Her skin was the palest blue Liam had seen among these people, her markings faded with age. "Lyra," Zyra said, her voice softening. Lyra approached Liam without fear, reaching up to touch his face with gnarled fingers. Her eyes, cloudy with age but still alert, studied him intently. She spoke quietly to Kalen, who responded with obvious disagreement but did not interfere as she examined Liam more thoroughly. When she reached the bite marks on his neck, her expression changed. She looked sharply at Zyra, then back at Liam, her fingers gently probing the healing punctures. Something about what she found seemed to surprise and interest her deeply. After a lengthy discussion in which Lyra's calm voice gradually tempered Kalen's anger, a decision was reached. Liam would be allowed to stay, but under guard and restricted to certain areas. Zyra would remain responsible for him, a responsibility she accepted with a formal gesture, touching her forehead to Kalen's extended hand. Liam was led to a small dwelling near the outer edge of the settlement. Though not restrained, warriors positioned themselves nearby, making it clear he was still essentially a prisoner. Zyra remained with him, explaining through gestures and the few shared words they had established that he would be safe if he cooperated. As darkness fell, Lyra visited them. She brought various herbs and implements, including a small, sharp-boned needle. Through gestures, she indicated she wished to take a small amount of Liam's blood. After a moment's hesitation, he extended his arm, curious about her interest. Lyra collected the blood in a tiny crystal vial, then mixed a drop with various substances, observing the reactions closely. Her methodical approach reminded Liam of scientists in his laboratories back on Earth, though her tools were primitive by comparison. When she finished, she spoke at length to Zyra, occasionally pointing to Liam or to the forest. Though he couldn't understand the words, her tone conveyed significance and urgency. Zyra nodded frequently, her expression growing increasingly serious. After Lyra departed, Zyra attempted to explain. She drew on a piece of bark, creating representations of the shadow stalkers, then the blighted areas they had observed. She drew Liam's ship, then a larger structure deeper in the forest, connecting them with a wavy line. Finally, she drew something that resembled cellular structures, pointing alternately to the blight and to Liam's blood sample. The message was becoming clearer. Lyra believed there was a connection between the crash, the blight affecting Viridia, and something unique in Liam's biology. What remained unclear was whether she viewed him as part of the problem or potentially part of the solution. Over the following days, Liam's status in the Sylvan community, as he learned they called themselves, gradually shifted. While still regarded with suspicion by many, especially Kalen and his supporters, others showed growing curiosity. Lyra visited daily, conducting various tests on samples of his blood, saliva, and skin cells. Zyra remained his constant companion, interpreter, and protector. The bond between them continued to evolve. The bites became less frequent, but more meaningful. Not the result of irresistible compulsion, but conscious choice, often in moments of connection or shared discovery. Liam found he could anticipate when Zyra needed the connection, recognizing subtle changes in her demeanor or physical signs of withdrawal. For her part, Zyra became more controlled in taking only what she needed, the exchange becoming almost ceremonial. Liam's understanding of Sylvan language improved gradually. He learned that they were indeed the dominant sentient species on Viridia, living in various tribal groups throughout the forest. This particular clan, led by Kalen, had inhabited this region for countless generations. They were hunter-gatherers with a complex spiritual tradition centered around the forest's rhythms and entities they called the Ancient Ones, possibly the massive, ancient trees that supported their dwellings. The shadow stalkers, Liam discovered, were a relatively recent phenomenon. They had begun appearing approximately 2 seasons ago, first as isolated incidents, but with increasing frequency. Simultaneously, the blight had spread, affecting plants, water sources, and eventually animal life. The Sylvans had initially attributed these changes to natural cycles or the displeasure of the Ancient Ones, but Lyra had suspected an outside cause even before Liam's arrival. One evening, as they shared a meal in their dwelling, Zyra finally explained the significance of her unusual reaction to Liam. Using a combination of newly learned words and expressive gestures, she conveyed that her venom, indeed, the venom of all Sylvans, had evolved as their primary hunting tool and defense mechanism. It paralyzed prey instantly and deterred larger predators. Never in their recorded history had any creature shown immunity, let alone the transformative reaction Liam experienced. More significant was her growing dependence. The connection established through the bite had become more than physical. It had created a bond that allowed her to sense Liam's emotions and physical state, just as he sometimes sensed hers. This was unheard of among her people, who used their venom clinically, without attachment to their prey. Lyra theorized that this unique interaction might be related to why the shadow stalkers showed partial resistance to sylvan venom. Something was changing on Viridia, altering fundamental biological interactions. She believed the source of these changes lay where Liam's ship had crashed, not because of the crash itself, but because of something that had been there before. 2 weeks after Liam's arrival at the Sylvan settlement, Lyra called a council meeting. In the central gathering space, elevated platforms held the clan's leaders and significant members. Liam and Zyra were positioned in the center, with Lyra nearby, surrounded by the curious and suspicious gazes of the assembled Sylvans. Lyra presented her findings, displaying various samples and drawings that illustrated the progression of the blight and its correlation with the appearance of shadow stalkers. She then revealed her most significant discovery. Liam's blood, when mixed with affected soil or water, neutralized the contamination to some degree. This announcement caused immediate uproar. Kaelin argued vehemently against trusting an outsider or attributing any positive qualities to him. Others expressed fascination with the possibility of combating the blight that threatened their way of life. The debate raged until Lyra proposed a decisive course of action: an expedition to the source of the contamination, which she believed lay beyond the crash site, deeper in the unexplored territory. The proposal was controversial. Such a journey would be dangerous, potentially fatal. The territory was now heavily populated with shadow stalkers and other mutated wildlife. Yet the alternative, watching their home slowly succumb to the blight, was equally unacceptable. After heated debate, a compromise was reached. A small group would undertake the expedition: Lyra to analyze what they found, Zyra as an experienced hunter familiar with Liam, 2 warriors selected for their tracking and combat skills, and Liam himself, whose blood might prove crucial and whose knowledge of technology could be valuable if they encountered artificial structures. Kaelin opposed sending Liam, but was overruled by the council majority. However, he insisted on sending one of his most loyal warriors, Nerone, ostensibly for additional protection, but clearly to keep watch over Liam. Preparations for the journey took 3 days. Liam was equipped with sylvan clothing better suited to the forest environment, though he kept his tablet and bioscanner. Zyra crafted him a proper spear and taught him basic defensive techniques. Lyra prepared medicines and collection vessels for samples. Food, water, and other supplies were distributed among the group members. The morning of their departure was marked by a brief ceremony. Kaelin reluctantly bestowed his blessing, touching each traveler's forehead with a crystal-tipped staff. As he reached Liam, his expression hardened, and the touch became almost a jab. The message was clear. Kaelin still considered him a threat, tolerated only out of necessity. The journey began at dawn. They traveled in formation, with one warrior scouting ahead, Zyra and Liam in the middle alongside Lyra, and Nerone bringing up the rear. Their path initially retraced Liam and Zyra's route to the Sylvan settlement, then continued beyond to the crash site. The Stardust looked different now, nearly a month after the crash. Vegetation had claimed much of the wreckage, luminescent vines threading through twisted metal and broken components. The bodies of Liam's crewmates had been removed earlier by Sylvan scouts and given proper burial according to their customs, a gesture of respect that had surprised and moved Liam when he learned of it. They lingered only briefly at the crash site. Liam collected a few more potentially useful items from the wreckage, while Lyra examined the surrounding soil and vegetation, taking samples that showed high levels of contamination. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as her testing revealed the blight's concentration was strongest not at the crash site itself, but in a direction beyond it. Following Lyra's guidance, they traveled deeper into unexplored territory. The forest grew denser, darker, the bioluminescent flora taking on sickly hues of yellow and purple rather than the healthy blues and greens of the Sylvan territory. Wildlife became scarce, and what they did encounter often showed signs of mutation: asymmetrical growths, unusual behavior, aggression disproportionate to their size. By nightfall, They made camp in a small clearing, establishing a perimeter of crystal shards that Zyra explained would alert them to approaching predators. As they shared a modest meal, tension within the group was palpable. Nerone watched Liam with barely concealed hostility, while the other warrior, Phalo, maintained professional detachment. Lyra seemed lost in thought, occasionally making notes with a charcoal stick on flattened bark. Zyra positioned herself protectively near Liam, her attention divided between him and the dark forest beyond their camp. "The blight is worse than we feared," Lyra said in the Sylvan language, which Liam now understood in fragments. "It spreads beneath the soil, through water. The ancient ones are suffering." "How much further?" Zyra asked, scanning the darkness. "The contamination increases in that direction." Lyra gestured northward. "We should reach the source tomorrow if we maintain our pace." Nerone spoke up, his tone sharp. "And if the Skyman's blood truly helps, what then? Do we drain him dry to save our forest?" He looked directly at Liam as he said this, making it clear he considered this a reasonable solution. Zyra hissed, a sound Liam had learned indicated extreme displeasure among Sylvans. "His name is Liam, and he is under my protection. His blood may help, but Lyra has already shown we need only small amounts. He is more valuable alive." "For your addiction, perhaps," Nerone replied coolly. "We all see how you depend on his taste now." Before Zyra could respond, possibly violently, Lyra intervened. "Enough. We need rest. Tomorrow will test us all." The night passed in uneasy shifts, each member taking turns to watch except Lyra, who was deemed too valuable to risk tiring. Liam found sleep elusive, the strange sounds of the blighted forest keeping him alert despite his exhaustion. During his watch, Zyra joined him, though it wasn't her shift. "Nerone speaks from fear," she said softly, her command of Liam's language still basic but improving. "Many fear what is not understood." "I understand fear," Liam replied. "My people often fear what's different too." Zyra was silent for a moment, then touched the bite marks on his neck gently. "This connection, I did not choose it at first. Now I would not lose it." Her admission seemed to cost her, vulnerability not coming naturally to a hunter. "Nor would I," Liam said, surprising himself with his sincerity. Whatever had begun as a predator-prey relationship had evolved into something neither of them had words to describe. He felt her presence even when they weren't touching, sensed her emotions as shadows of his own. The bites, once terrifying, now brought a communion that transcended their biological differences. "Sleep," Zyra said finally. "I watch now." Dawn brought renewed purpose and increasing signs they were approaching something significant. The vegetation showed extreme effects of the blight. Plants grew in twisted configurations, their natural luminescence either extinguished or flaring in sporadic, almost seizure-like pulses. The air carried a metallic tang that made breathing uncomfortable. Lyra's tests of soil and water samples showed contamination levels that should have been lethal, yet somehow life persisted, albeit in warped forms. Liam's bioscanner detected energy signatures that matched nothing in its database, fluctuating in patterns that suggested artificial rather than natural origins. Midday, they crested a rise and saw it. A structure unlike anything native to Viridia, partially embedded in the earth as if it had crashed long ago or been deliberately buried. Unlike Liam's ship, this wasn't a vessel designed for travel between worlds. It was angular, utilitarian, composed of dark alloys that absorbed rather than reflected light. No markings were visible from their vantage point, but its human, or at least non-Viridian, origin was unmistakable. "What is it?" Zyra asked, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. "Not from my ship," Liam clarified immediately, noticing Nerone's suspicious glare. "But made by beings like me, I think. It's a facility of some kind." "Facility?" Lyra asked, unfamiliar with the term. "A structure for work, research, perhaps, or resource extraction." Liam felt a growing dread as the implication settled. "How long has the blight been spreading?" 2 cycles of the greater moon," Lyra answered. "Perhaps 60 of your days." That timeline didn't align with his crash, confirming this facility predated his arrival. But why hadn't the Stardust's preliminary surveys detected it? The answer came as his bioscanner picked up unusual readings. The structure was emitting a dampening field that would have masked it from orbital scans. This was deliberate concealment. As they approached cautiously, evidence of the facility's purpose became clearer and more disturbing. Extraction machinery extended from its northern face, drilling deep into Viridia's crust. Collection tanks held iridescent fluids that Liam suspected were native compounds with valuable properties. Most damning was the complete absence of containment protocols. Waste products were simply expelled into the surrounding environment, the source of the blight now poisoning the forest. Corporate mining operation, Liam said grimly. Illegal. No environmental safeguards. They're extracting resources and don't care what damage they cause. Lyra touched one of the tanks, then quickly withdrew her hand as if burned. This kills the ancient ones. Poisons the water, the soil, the air we breathe. Can we destroy it? Thalo asked, speaking for the first time since they'd left camp that morning. Not safely, Liam warned. Those tanks, if they rupture all at once, the contamination would spread even faster. We need to shut it down properly, neutralize what's already been released. You know this technology? Zyra asked. Some of it. Enough to try, Liam replied. His background was in xenobiology, not engineering, but all expedition members received basic training in various technologies they might encounter. I need to get inside, find the control systems. Nerone stepped forward. Convenient that you know how to operate this death machine your kind built. Not my kind, Liam said firmly. My expedition was scientific, authorized. This, he gestured at the facility. This is corporate piracy. Illegal even by my world's laws. Before Nerone could respond, movement caught their attention. From around the facility's perimeter, shadow stalkers emerged. Not 3 or 4 as they'd encountered before, but a dozen or more. These showed even more extreme mutations, some barely recognizable as Viridian fauna. Behind them came something worse. Humanoid figures in environmental suits, carrying weapons. Down, Liam hissed, pulling Zyra and Lyra into the cover of a large, twisted root structure. Thalo and Nerone followed instantly, their hunter's instincts overriding any mistrust. From their hiding place, they observed the suited figures, 3 of them, directing the shadow stalkers like trained animals. The creatures patrolled in patterns too regular to be natural, guarding the facility with unnerving coordination. Security, Liam whispered. The facility is automated, but they must make periodic checks. The shadow stalkers, they're not just mutations. They've been deliberately altered, weaponized. With our venom, Lyra added, her ancient eyes narrowing. I see how their movements change. They have been made resistant, but not immune, and they obey these. Not people. We cannot fight so many, Thalo stated pragmatically. Not directly. Zyra studied the patrol patterns. The dark brings advantages to hunters, she said. We wait. They retreated to a safer distance, establishing a hidden observation point from which they could monitor the facility. As hours passed, they noted personnel changes, patrol timings, and potential vulnerabilities. By nightfall, they had formulated a plan, risky, with multiple potential failure points, but the only option given their limited resources. Lyra would remain at their camp, preparing treatments from Liam's blood samples to neutralize contamination. Thalo would create a diversion on the far side of the facility, drawing away some of the shadow stalkers. Zyra, Liam, and Nerone would infiltrate the facility, with Liam attempting to access the control systems while Zyra and Nerone provided protection. The plan nearly collapsed before it began when Nerone voiced his distrust. How do we know he won't activate some greater poison once inside, or signal others of his kind? Because I'm trying to save my life too, Liam replied evenly. And because whatever connection you think I have to this place is wrong. My mission was to study Viridia, not exploit it. My crew died in that crash. Do you think I'd honor their memory by helping those who might have caused their deaths? His words seemed to reach something in Nerone, not trust, exactly, but a grudging recognition of shared purpose. The Sylvan warrior nodded once, sharply, a temporary truce established. Under cover of darkness, enhanced by a dense mist rising from the blighted ground, they moved into position. Thalo disappeared into the forest, carrying bundles of reactive minerals that would create significant disturbances when combined. The diversion worked better than anticipated. When the first explosions erupted from the forest's edge, accompanied by Thalo's skillful mimicry of shadow stalker calls, more than half the security force responded, including 2 of the suited personnel. Zyra led Liam and Nerone to a maintenance access identified during their observation, a panel partially concealed by encroaching vegetation. Liam worked quickly with tools salvaged from the stardust, bypassing basic security measures designed to deter wildlife rather than determined intruders. Inside, the facility was sterile and utilitarian. Corridors of metal and composite materials, harsh lighting, and the constant hum of machinery. They moved silently, Zyra and Nerone adapting quickly to the unfamiliar environment with their hunter's instincts. Liam found what he was looking for in a central chamber, control interfaces for the automated systems. The displays confirmed his worst fears. This was indeed an illegal mining operation, established by a subsidiary of Quantum Extraction Corporation, a notorious entity known for exploiting unprotected worlds. They were harvesting a compound found only on Viridia, crucial for next-generation quantum computing, valuable enough to justify extreme measures and criminal disregard for environmental impact. More disturbing were research logs detailing experiments with native fauna, particularly predator species. The operators had discovered the potent properties of sylvan venom and were attempting to synthesize it, using shadow stalkers as test subjects. The creature's mutations were deliberate, efforts to create biologically enhanced security that could withstand the venom that would normally incapacitate them. "They've known about your people for months," Liam told Zyra, disgust evident in his voice. "They've been studying you from a distance, collecting specimens." Zyra's expression shifted from confusion to rage as she grasped the implications. Her people were being treated as resources to be exploited, just like their forest. Liam worked rapidly at the controls, shutting down extraction processes, initiating containment protocols that had been deliberately disabled, and most importantly, accessing the facility's communication system. He composed an emergency signal that would be picked up by any legitimate human vessel in the sector, a detailed report of the illegal operation complete with coordinates and evidence of environmental crimes and xenobiological exploitation. "We need to release the neutralizing agent," he explained to Zyra and Nerone as he worked. "The facility has emergency decontamination systems. If I can reprogram them to distribute Lyra's treatment instead of their standard protocols." A security alert interrupted his explanation. The remaining guard and several shadow stalkers were returning, apparently aware of the intrusion. They had minutes at most before they'd be discovered. Liam worked frantically, transferring data to his tablet, while simultaneously preparing the decontamination systems. Zyra and Nerone took defensive positions near the chamber's entrance, weapons ready. The first shadow stalker reached them before Liam finished. Zyra engaged it with lethal efficiency, but her venom bite had limited effect due to its engineered resistance. Nerone joined the fight, the 2 Sylvan warriors working in coordinated tandem despite their previous antagonism. More creatures poured in, followed by the guard in his environmental suit. When he saw Liam at the controls, he drew a weapon, a compact energy pistol capable of delivering lethal force. "Step away from the console," the guard ordered, his voice metallic through his suit's speakers. Liam raised his hands but didn't move from the console. "You know what you're doing here is illegal. Environmental exploitation, xenobiological experimentation without oversight." "Save it," the guard cut him off. "This operation is worth billions. Your ethics lecture won't change anything." He gestured with the weapon. "Now move, or I start shooting your indigenous friends." The moment stretched, a tableau of tension. Zyra and Nerone still fighting shadow stalkers with increasing difficulty, the guard with his weapon trained on them, Liam at the console with his hands raised. What happened next occurred so quickly that Liam's human reflexes could barely track it. Zyra, sensing the immediate threat to him through their bond, disengaged from her opponent with blinding speed. She launched herself toward the guard, moving faster than Liam had ever seen her move. The guard fired, the energy bolt grazing her shoulder and leaving a charred wound. Yet she didn't falter, colliding with him with enough force to send them both crashing into a bank of secondary controls. The guard's protective suit prevented her venom from penetrating when she bit his armored shoulder, but the impact had cracked his visor. Zyra targeted this vulnerability instantly, delivering a precise bite to the exposed flesh of his neck before he could recover. Unlike Liam, the guard had no immunity. The venom took effect immediately, paralyzing him completely. Zyra left him immobilized on the floor, returning to help Nerone with the remaining Shadow Stalkers. Liam seized the opportunity. He completed the reprogramming sequence, replacing the standard decontamination formula with Lyra's treatment derived from his blood. With a final command, he activated the facility's emergency protocols. Klaxons blared as the ventilation system began dispersing a fine mist throughout the facility and into the surrounding environment via external vents. "We need to leave. Now," Liam shouted over the alarms. "I've initiated a system overload. Once the neutralizing agent is fully deployed, this place will shut down permanently." They fought their way out, Zyra's shoulder wound hampering her, but not defeating her. Nerone proved his worth as a warrior, covering their retreat with skill that earned Liam's genuine respect. Outside, they reunited with Thalo, who had successfully maintained his diversion despite injuries of his own. As they retreated to a safe distance, the facility's lights flickered, then went dark. Moments later, a series of controlled detonations collapsed key structural points, ensuring the operation could not be easily restarted. The neutralizing agent continued to disperse, a gentle rain of salvation for the blighted forest. Back at their camp, Lyra treated their wounds while they reported their findings. Her weathered face showed both sorrow at the exploitation of her world and determination to heal what had been damaged. "The Ancient Ones will recover in time," she said, applying a healing paste to Zyra's shoulder. "Your blood carries something that counteracts the poison. Already the smallest plants respond." Dawn revealed the first signs of improvement. The sickly glow of blighted vegetation had dimmed, replaced in spots by the natural, healthy luminescence native to Viridia. It would take time, perhaps seasons, for the forest to fully heal, but the process had begun. Their return journey to the Sylvan settlement was arduous, but marked by growing camaraderie. Even Nerone showed a newfound respect for Liam, speaking to him directly rather than through Zyra and sharing hunting techniques as they traveled. When they reached the settlement, they were greeted with mixed reactions: joy at their return, suspicion about their claims, fear of what they had discovered. Kalen initially dismissed their account of the human facility, suggesting Liam had manufactured the tale to absolve himself of responsibility for the blight. The turning point came when Lyra presented her evidence. Samples from before and after treatment with a neutralizing agent documented changes in affected plants and soil, and most convincingly, a small shadow stalker they had captured and restrained for study. Its unnatural mutations and behavior patterns could not be explained by any natural process known to the Sylvans. In the face of this evidence, even Kalen had to acknowledge the truth. A council was convened to determine next steps. After much debate, two decisions were reached. First, regular expeditions would distribute the neutralizing agent throughout affected areas of the forest. Second, Liam would be granted status as an ally of the Sylvan people rather than a prisoner or mere guest. This second decision was not without controversy. Some, including Kalen, argued that Liam should leave Viridia once the forest was healed, returning to his own kind. Others, led by Lyra, contended that his presence was beneficial. His blood provided ongoing protection against any remaining contamination, and his knowledge of human technology could help defend against future exploitation. Zyra said little during these debates, but her position was clear in her actions. The bond between her and Liam had deepened through their shared dangers and discoveries. What had begun as a predator's addiction had evolved into something unprecedented, a symbiotic relationship between species beneficial to both. When pressed to speak, she finally addressed the council directly. Liam is no longer fully of his world, nor is he of ours. Our venoms have mingled. Our blood carries echoes of each other. The forest has claimed him as it has claimed us. She touched the bite marks on her own arm, where Liam, in a moment of desperate inspiration during their escape, had bitten her to transfer some of her venom back to aid her healing. The marks had left a pattern unlike anything seen before, a physical manifestation of their unique bond. In the end, the matter was settled not by council decree, but by necessity. A scouting party returned with urgent news. Ships had been detected in the upper atmosphere, likely responding to Liam's emergency signal. Within days, authorized representatives from the Galactic Survey Commission would arrive, bringing technology and resources that could help heal Viridia more quickly and ensure the illegal mining operation was properly dismantled and its perpetrators brought to justice. Liam would be needed as intermediary between the Sylvans and these newcomers. His knowledge of both worlds positioned him uniquely to advocate for Viridia's protection and the Sylvans' rights as sentient native inhabitants. Seasons passed. The GSC established a small, unobtrusive monitoring station on Viridia with the Sylvans' consent. The forest recovered more rapidly than even Lyra had predicted, the resilience of Viridian life asserting itself once the contamination was neutralized. Quantum Extraction Corporation faced severe penalties for its illegal activities, including substantial reparations that funded continued restoration efforts. Liam never returned to Earth. The choice, when it came, wasn't really a choice at all. His bond with Zyra had become essential to both of them. Not just the physical connection of their venoms, but the deeper communion they had forged through shared danger and purpose. What had begun as addiction had transformed into symbiosis, then into something human languages had no word for, but the Sylvans called soul binding. They established a dwelling on the boundary between the Sylvan settlement and the small human outpost, symbolically bridging the two worlds. Liam continued his original mission as xenobiologist, documenting Viridia's extraordinary ecosystem with Zyra as his guide and partner. Together, they became guardians of the delicate balance between technological advancement and natural harmony. The bite marks on Liam's neck never fully faded. They remained as a testament to their first encounter and the extraordinary journey that followed. What once paralyzed had become a conduit for connection. What began as venom had transformed into vital essence. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, Zyra would trace those marks with gentle fingers, remembering how fate had brought them together through crash and capture, addiction and alliance, danger and devotion. And sometimes, when a greater moon cast its azure light through their dwelling, she would deliver a new bite, not from need or compulsion, but as an act of communion. The venom would course through him, heightening his senses until he could perceive the world as she did, while she tasted in his blood the resilience and adaptability that had saved them both. In those moments, they were neither human nor Sylvan, but something new, a symbiosis born of venom and trust, a union that had healed not just themselves, but an entire world.